Hi.
Hey, Queen.
You've done it again.
Girl, you have done it again. So, we got COVID.
A breakthrough case.
A breakthrough case. I'll be vague about where we got it, but we got it from somebody very high up in a health department from a pretty prestigious school in California.
And look, it's important to know, like, whenever these kinds of things happen, you know, people go, what were you doing that was irresponsible, right? Like, were you traveling? Were you doing this, doing that? Like, these high probability of getting it from the general public sort of situations. And I think I've said it before. I'm kind of a hermit, so I don't really go out. And in fact, like, after we had 3 different social events, so Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Sunday being Halloween.
Yeah.
And I told Sean on that Sunday night, or I think even before the Sunday event, that I do not want to see people for 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah, that is so funny. I was thinking about that, too. You cursed yourself.
I think I might have. Yeah.
And so you said, I don't want to see people for 2 weeks. And God, she looked down at us and she said, bet.
Yeah, sent by Jesus, I was licking every doorknob in the house.
Yeah, I went to the aquarium and I was sucking on the glass. That's how I got it.
Yeah.
So
making out with what's the, like, minks, the ones we cold because of coronavirus.
Yeah.
Just kissing them.
We had to cull them. That is such a brutal, inhumane way of saying we committed
Mass
genocide on the mink.
Yeah. So, you know, it was interesting. So, fortunately, you know, the people that we got it from, well, because I did have, like, a few days of guilt whether or not, like, I had maybe brought it to their house. You know what I mean? But then nobody at the 2 events we went to before got it.
Yeah.
So it was definitely from here. And plus, like, the person that I got it from got it, I think already had it that night because he just said he was tired, but then he tested and then warned us that, you know, look, I tested positive for this, so it's possible you guys do too. And it was bizarre because it was Monday at about, like, 4 p.m. I was on the computer here, and then, like, I already kind of just felt like chest tightness. Like, I was trying to explain what it feels like to people. It's like if you go into a this whole thing kind of came in stages. So the first thing I felt was if you go into a sauna and it's super duper hot and you breathe in and it kind of makes you cough. It was like, but only like the top of your lungs.
Yeah.
And I was like, this doesn't feel good. And then the Tuesday after that, I was like, I have a cold. It kind of just felt like a cold. It didn't feel like that big of a deal, but I'm like, the coincidence is too high on this.
Yeah.
We had the luxury of having a bunch of at-home tests. I tested negative that day. Then the Wednesday afterwards, I tested positive. You said you just had a tickle in your throat up until that Wednesday. Then that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I was really sick.
And I didn't start testing positive, I think, until like Friday or something like that. So, but yeah, it was, look, like we did everything right. We got vaccinated. I haven't been to a huge gathering other than, like, the night market we went to, and there was one other thing.
Yeah,
right.
Like we did too. Well, then I went to that Van Morrison concert.
Oh yeah,
and like
outside though.
Yeah,
both of those things were outside.
And so, I mean, I guess there is something to it being indoors, which we knew that, you know, obviously, but you know, at the same time, it's like This is the part that is really the scandal to me. So. We both got the vaccine. We told you all about that. 2 doses of the old Pfizer. And I got really sick the second day. So, like, for about like a day and a half.
From the vaccine.
Yes.
Yeah, the second dose.
Yeah, you were totally fine.
Yeah.
And our COVID kind of played out similarly, which is interesting. Just in terms of, like, severity. But, you know, look, so we're less than 5 months out from getting it. And we know people that didn't get the vaccine, they got COVID, and our level of illness was completely comparable.
Exactly the same.
So I think the scandal is it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It didn't work, doesn't work. These breakthrough cases, you know, like, I was thinking about this because I had a lot of time to think during all this. And
at home.
What they say is, okay, well, if you get the vaccine, your likelihood of serious illness or hospitalization is lower. Well, you know, I don't really think it did that. And I think it's a very convenient way of explaining what they don't have an answer to, which is also why people like myself get really sick when we get the vaccine. And then they tell us, oh, well, you just have such a robust immune system, so people can just sort of rest easy with this lie, right? Is that like, if you get the vaccine, you won't end up in the hospital. If you get the vaccine, it makes you sick, you're just so strong and powerful. That's why you got super sick. So it's just these sort of lies they tell the public to placate them over this.
Yeah.
The bright side of all this is that, the long-term bright side is that now I don't have to at least think about this for a minimum of 3 months,
Yeah, getting COVID is not...
And so
getting COVID again is not going to happen.
Basically through the winter where cases will go up and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't really have to think about it. And also, I mean, just conventional wisdom would dictate that if we got it again, it would not be as severe. But there was one night in particular that, like, we don't have a thermometer here, but like my fever was so high that I was like rambling to myself, like hallucinating and rambling to myself. The cough never got bad. It's omnipresent. Like, it won't go away. But yeah, like even you woke up and heard me like rambling.
It was a little concerning. But like I talk in my sleep all the time, so I was like, oh, maybe I'm just catching him like in a moment that he's actually doing it, and it's not me this time.
No,
but
I was like aware that I was doing it. It's like I was kind of like fading in and out of relative consciousness, and then like I would be having like a dream type state, and then I would finish the sentence that I was saying, but I couldn't really stop myself from doing it. It was really strange. And so like I didn't say anything to you at the time, but like if that had continued into the next day, I would have probably asked you to take me to the hospital. Like, and so, and then, like it was a combination for me of just being absolutely drenched in sweat and cold and shivering and just bad. But it was like 3 days of bad shit, and
it was like no sickness has ever put me in the hospital. But this one got as bad as any other sickness I've had that got bad.
Yes.
Like this, if we were supposed to have, like weathered this sickness better because of the vaccine, it would not have been as bad as it was. We were out of commission.
Yeah.
Like for at least, those 3 days that it was really bad. And then the rest we could like, I don't know, buy NyQuil at CVS, and that would exhaust us for the rest of the day.
That would have probably been the case had we not been vaccinated. So like, and then like now we're stuck in this giant logistical bureaucratic nightmare. So
that's been arguably the most painful part of all of this.
So you should explain what your school's doing to you.
Well, luckily, like you don't have to report to the city or the state or whatever that you got it. And we had these rapid tests.
We also had the luxury of not having to do that. Like, because like I don't really like, because also, the thing of not like, avoiding having to go get officially tested, like with the PCR thing, was to avoid what you then had to deal with, which to me is invasive and weird. And why? It
was psychotic what I dealt with. So I'll give a quick rundown, but then I also would want to go through my my journalistic venture, based on what I ended up doing.
Oh, and I didn't stop vaping, so that probably didn't help. And I'm going to do it right now. So I'm just telling you, I'm a man of many weaknesses, and here's one of them.
So because I had to miss class because I knew I had COVID because I took a positive test, I had to email my professor who, on Monday morning, I have class, Monday, 8 a.m. This would have been, so Halloween happened on a Sunday. The next day was my Monday morning class. I went to that one, not feeling anything, no symptoms, didn't even know I had been exposed or whatever. And then after that class, you started to get a tickle in your throat. Or you started to feel sick. I started to get the tickle in my throat. I emailed my professor, hey, I took a COVID test and I'm positive. I'm not going to come to the next class for obvious reasons. And she was like, okay, can you submit to me the test results that you got? And I was like, okay, I'll send you my rapid test results. I'll send a picture of myself with the rapid test that says positive so that she knows it's me. It's not me like stealing a photo from Google or whatever. She's like, great. You need to report this to the student health services now for it to be like a valid excuse for your absence. Student Health Services gives me so much fucking sass for no reason. I tell them I'm positive, and I'm not going to come to school. So there's my case report. And they're like, well, you actually need a PCR test to prove that you're COVID positive. And I'm like, why? I know that I'm COVID positive. Why would I get a PCR test and like endanger somebody else? Because I already know I have it. And they're like, well, we just need it. And I'm like, okay, where do I do that? And they're like, come to campus and get a PCR test so that you can test positive. And I'm like, wait, so you're telling me to knowingly come to campus with COVID so that I can get a PCR test and know the result that I already know in 2 days? And they're like, yep, you got to do it. It's like, all right. Just so we're clear, Raul was his name. Fucking asshole. I hate this man. Mm-hmm. Just so we're clear, Raul. Like, I know it's not his fault, but he didn't have to sass me in the way he did. Just so we're clear, Raul. You're telling me to come to campus with COVID right now. And he was like, I'm telling you to get a PCR test on campus. I'm like, I have COVID. You're telling me to knowingly bring COVID to the campus. And he was like, it's you got to do it. But the sass he gave me, that was like, I told him like, I don't want to come to campus. And then he was like, you have to do it. And I'm like, fine, I'm going to come to campus every single day. And he was like, well, now you're just contradicting yourself. Do you hear yourself? And I'm like, excuse me?
You didn't tell me that part of it.
Yeah, he said that to me. It was really cool. And so that's when I kind of flipped. I'm like, I'm going to come to campus every single day with COVID to get a PCR test until I test negative. How does that sound? And he was like, if you want to do that, you can do that. I'm like, that sounds really safe and responsible, doesn't it, Raul?
Prick.
I hate that man. Again, not his fault. COVID policy on campus.
Yeah, he didn't have to be a dick about it, though.
But he was a dick about it. So I do that. I go to campus. I get my PCR test. It obviously comes back positive.
The thing I want to, like, just a real quick pin. Like, the thing that, and I'll get into this after you explain all this, is, like, the absolute level of importance we're supposed to put on this.
Yeah.
But the absolute lack of sympathy with the inconvenience this causes the person that gets the virus.
Yes.
And it just, again, it just reiterates this point of, like, how important is this really?
Yes. So, go to campus, get my PCR test. I meet this really lovely student health services worker. She was a student at the school. I won't say her name, but, like, I'll remember her. I wrote her name down because, like, I'm going to end up seeing her again at some point, I'm sure. Like, we'll run into each other on campus. She was such a sweetheart, and as I finished taking the test, of course I'm still masked up and everything, but, like, as I finish taking the test, I go up to her and I'm like, hey, like, do you have a second to talk? I am doing a report on frontline workers during COVID on campus, and I wanted to maybe ask you a few questions. And she was so eager to talk to me, like, so happy to answer my questions about what it's like doing the job that she does. So basically she's basically like an usher. She tells you which stall to go to and then tells you to leave. Like, that's all she does. But I'll open up my notes because I asked her a ton of questions and got a ton of answers from her. But she was so sweet. Answered all my questions and, like, told me what I suspected, or what we already knew, basically, about being this kind of employee. But anyways, as I'm leaving, I get a call from the nurse manager of Student Health Services, and she was like, "Hey, Raul passed your number to me, and he said you had some complaints." And I'm like, "Oh, I certainly do." And so I just told her that I got a test and that I was going to come back to campus every single day until I test negative. I ended up not doing that. I thought it was a little extreme and a little reckless. But here's the journalism that I did. Here's my journalism for the week. Mm-hmm. So basically, when I talked to Raul, he works in the office at the Student Health Services. Needed the PCR test. I already told you guys all of this, but he on the record said yes, that I should come to campus with COVID as many times as I want to get that PCR test. Okay. But anyways, I met this girl on campus who was doing the ushering or whatever. I asked her if she was a volunteer. No, she's paid to do it. She works for the Student Health Services. I asked her if she was comfortable telling me how much she made or if she made a comfortable amount of money. She flat out was like, oh, yeah, I'll tell you how much I make. It's $14.50 an hour. Do you want to know what the minimum wage is in California?
It's I think it's 12 something now.
No, it's $14.
Really? It's been up a lot.
And next year, January, in 2 months, it's going to be $15. It goes up like 50 cents a year until it reaches 15.
Okay.
She makes 50 cents above minimum wage, and when the new year rolls around, she's going to be making minimum wage. Probably below minimum wage for a little while until they sort it out.
To theoretically, like, I'm not going to, like, just to theoretically inconvenience herself in this exact same way that we did.
So $14.50 an hour is what she makes, doing work that is the most vulnerable to getting COVID.
Yes.
I asked her about paid leave and if she's gotten sick while doing this job. She hasn't, but a coworker of hers has. She's only been working this job since August. But her coworker had to call out sick from work for 2 full weeks. They were vaccinated 2 full weeks, which is against the CDC recommendation for isolating 10 days if you're fully vaccinated. 2 full weeks is if you're unvaccinated. But this student health services worker, her coworker, had to call out sick for 2 weeks, as well as calling out sick from school for 2 weeks, because only students can work in the student health services in the position that she's in, or only students do. The 2 weeks that you have to take off from work are unpaid 2 weeks. So you don't make any money during the time that you are exposed to COVID. If you have a positive COVID test, you don't make any of the money that you were expecting to make, even if you only work 20 hours like she does. So unpaid, completely unpaid work. She hasn't had to call out sick, but she has to get a test every single time she has any symptom of COVID. That includes a headache. That includes any kind of shortness of breath. She's required to get a COVID test every single time she feels anything for that. And if she gets a positive test, she's out for 2 weeks from school and from work.
And theoretically, you could have a positive test for
90 days.
Right.
She also told me she is a medical sciences major, which is basically like a pre-med major.
Yes.
She is a full-time student. She's a junior. She's got a lot of fucking shit on her plate. So I asked her, like, if she has a hard time juggling school and work, even with this job only working 20 hours. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm about as stressed as I would be working a regular job, but I am twice as scared working this job because I know that if I get sick, my life is over for 2 weeks and I'm going to spend the next year catching up, which was really great to hear. Overall, though, she said she is generally happy or satisfied with the job because she's not happy with it. She said that she feels exactly the same way she would feel if she were working at Target and had a 20-hour-a-week job,
which she did
Target,
before,
and she
right?
used to work at Target before. She said she feels exactly the same. They treat her the same. She gets to sit down and take breaks.
And it feels like something you're doing is making some kind of impact on the world.
Yeah. But the most egregious part to me was $14.50 an hour and no paid leave if you get sick.
Right.
Which is a natural hazard of the job she's working.
Which I think that, like, that particular issue is what has really been beyond illuminating to me regarding this. And so, look, you know, when you hear people like Joe Rogan or whatever, or like people on the internet say that, like, California is this lockdown, whatever. Like, no, everything's pretty much open. It's just all security theater. But the security theater does exhaust you because, you know, like, so I don't know. There's more to this, I remember. So
yeah, I ended up speaking to the nurse manager at the Student Health Services. And the nurse manager was the one who told me I could theoretically test positive for COVID for the next 90 days.
Don't they require you to have a negative test to go back to school?
No, it's either 10 days of isolation or a negative test.
I see.
And so obviously I have to do the isolation. But the conversation I had with her on the phone, I was on campus when this happened. She called me after I finished my interview with this sweet girl who agreed to talk to me. The nurse manager, Tressa. What kind of name is that? Tressa.
It sounds like
the nurse manager.
Someone tried to like name their daughter Teresa and was too drunk. Forgot
an E.
Yeah.
Calls me as I'm leaving the test. Also giving me an unnecessary amount of sass from the start of the conversation.
Right.
By the end of the conversation, I got her to come around.
Good.
Basically, though, she was telling me, like, you could test positive for 90 days. You need to get a PCR test because of, like, statistical things, and it's COVID policy in LA County, so you have to do this. I'm like, God damn it, fine. Well, I'm on campus right now with COVID to get that PCR test. Like, I just had it, and I'll probably get my results soon. And she's like, wait, you're on campus? And I'm like, yeah, Raul said I should do this. She was like, you didn't have to come to campus for this.
You didn't tell me this part.
And I'm like, well, I'm going to because I was told to.
You did have to go, though,
exactly.
Right?
I'd have to go to campus to get the PCR test, or I could go to some other place and get a PCR test. But why would I do that when I can, they told me I had to come to campus.
Yeah.
So I went to campus with COVID, knowingly. Of course, I was wearing a mask. I wasn't exposing anybody. But I told her, like, Raul told me to knowingly go to campus so that I could get a PCR test and prove that I am COVID positive. And then I also told her, like, I plan to come to campus every day until I test negative. I'm going to get a PCR test every single day. And she's like, well, you're probably going to test positive for 90 days. It's like, oh, great. But in the end, I was telling her, like, really what this comes down to is I would much rather have not disclosed my COVID status to the school and just missed one class, come back the next week without having to deal with this bureaucratic bullshit.
Isn't that something?
And I told her, and she agreed with me. I said, the protocols you have in place for reporting COVID greatly incentivize students to keep their illness a secret.
Yeah.
And she said, I wholly agree. I would have much rather kept this shit a secret.
Yeah, I know.
Much rather. I would rather keep it a secret. And, students who live on campus don't have the option of isolating at home because they have to be in a dorm with their like classmate or whatever.
Right.
So they can't isolate, but they would keep their illness a secret and infect other people because they have no choice.
Right.
I mean, look, like, I had to miss class. I had to not turn in a project that I worked for like 2 months on.
You have the highest grade in the class.
I have the highest grade in the class. My teacher's a bitch.
She is.
Like, she's one of the worst, and so this has been like super hard to deal with. This entire time, she's just been making me jump through hoops, and just like has no compassion. And so like I'm doing my litigation homework. Yeah, a podcast with two gay guys talking about being positive.
Awesome pause.
About testing positive. I really did my litigation homework. Like, I read the 19-page COVID handbook from my school and the 2-page faculty COVID protocol from my school.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that because that was also illuminating.
And my absence needs to be excused. And it is still not excused even though I've provided the fucking test, the PCR test that I had to go to campus to get. I still have a 0 for my attendance on a day that I could not be there for an illness I could not control.
There was also the compassion element, I remember.
Yes,
as well.
The final bullet point in the faculty COVID protocol PDF that I read from my school says student absences must be met with care and compassion. And I have felt none of that since I got COVID. From my school, none of my professors have cared except for one, the Armenian woman. My Armenian doctor who fucking teaches global sourcing for the fashion industry.
She was cool?
She's so cool.
Yeah.
She's always been cool.
Yeah, no, she sounds cool. I hear you like talk, or, like hear you in her classes and stuff.
So she has been like the only redeemable one.
What did she say about it? You didn't tell me this.
She said, "I am so sorry you got COVID.
Yeah.
I understand if you don't want to participate in any discussions during the class today, although I'm not going to stop you if you do." And I was like, "That's very sweet. Thank you." Blah, 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 blah. But it was just such a fucking
different.
Yes.
That's actually kind of like the overarching point I wanted to bring up is like how interesting this experience was for both of us for so many different reasons that have way more to do with just human interaction than it does with actually getting sick. So getting sick was shitty. Like we said in the beginning, like definitely would have played out the exact same way if we had gotten vaccinated or not. And we did. And we don't discourage people from doing that. Like,
yeah, get vaccinated.
If you're old or you're like compromised in some kind of way, you're overweight, just go and do it. You know, like we talked to our neighbors we like very much who are all really overweight, and they said it put them in the hospital for 15 days.
Crazy.
Especially one of her daughters, which she's a really, 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 really big girl. And so, yeah, you know, like, but we all did this and we're enduring this because there's no public health conversation about, you know, what might actually put you more at risk if you have a pulmonary virus, obviously. And then you look at the dead, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. There's no point like repeating that. So, but what I found interesting was, well, we can just, I don't even mind just saying it, the difference between our two families, right?
Absolutely.
Who are on totally opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. So, do you mind saying kind of your family's,
so
your parents?
My parents are not vaccinated. They're a bit more conservative. Not a big deal. They're not like an intolerable conservative. They're not like the Ben Shapiro's.
They're willing to like listen to like other viewpoints, you know.
Exactly. And I love that about them.
Me too.
But they're not vaccinated. My dad, probably more for medical reasons. He just recovered from cancer, so like, who knows what it would do to his body? Whatever. My mom, political reasons.
Yeah, sure.
But they both got COVID.
Yes.
In the last few months. My mom was as sick as we were.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, I think my dad had it in the hospital. I think we've talked about this.
And it's important to mention
when he was in chemo.
Yeah, well, it's important to mention that his mother, because your dad's like sort of a different example, which we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But like, your mother is about twice my age. Sorry if you're listening to this. But it's true, and she, I think, actually was less sick than I was, you know, like in terms of duration, you know?
In fact, my mom actually texted us while we were doing the podcast. I wonder if she's listening.
I wonder. And then your dad, who, you know, would have been sort of the candidate the world would have said you probably should have gotten vaccinated, but I respect his choices, unlike a lot of people who are on the pro side, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
Did get kind of... there was like a scary few days.
Of course, yeah. So he thought he had gotten it recently after my mom had gotten it. So like a month ago or so. And he ended up just getting pneumonia.
I think he did. Well, he did have COVID, but then it like got better, but then
something came back.
The peculiar part about this that I've found to be the unusual element of this illness, and Dalreese brought it up with us, I think in one of the videos I posted, kind of the update videos, of just this mucus is like particularly viscous. I've not really, like, it just doesn't clear in the same way. Like my head's still all plugged up. I don't think my left ear is going to be normal for quite a while. I'm left with like sort of coughing in the morning and then just general head congestion where it feels like my brain's floating. And more liquid than normal.
It's weird because when I was first getting really sick, the mucus was pouring out of my nose like water, like as thin as water, if not thinner. And then it started to become like way viscous, like very, like very
thick. Yeah.
Yeah, and it would not come out. Gross, but like it was strange how stark the difference was.
The thing that was weird about it for me was like on the days that I was starting to get better, but I still had like a fever, was my nose has never been particularly plugged, but my eustachian tubes, like my ears, have been like so plugged up and
awful.
But like, and there was one day I was like trying to clear it, and then it created this like horrible pain, like in like at 4 a.m. that like kept me up like for the rest of the day until I could get like stuff to clear it out. And but even then it's still just like stuck at 60%, you know, not even. It's probably like, it's still all fucked up. And so point of all that is it makes sense that like this would, if you weren't really, if you didn't have the capacity to clear it out of your lungs with like normal coughing, it would accelerate into like a chest infection like pneumonia, which is like what happened to your dad.
So we were talking about family differences, and like my parents, when we got sick and told them after a few days, they were jumping through hoops to like see how we were, give us things to help us get better, vitamins, what is it? Not a breathalyzer, a humidifier, nebulizer.
Yeah, with stuff that actually does make sense, like
this chair's so squeaky.
Albuterol, which is like what one takes like for asthma. It just sort of like makes your bronchial tube sort of like widen.
Yeah.
I used to take it when I grew out of asthma, but I had it as a kid, and then you know, all the other medications that come with the other side of the spectrum getting offered. But like we were kind of, by the time, like, because we didn't deliberately not tell them. It was just more like
I wanted to wait to have the conversation until we were like on the other end of the peak.
Yeah.
Or on the other side or whatever. So like I kind of didn't say anything because I didn't want to like have the conversation. And like like I didn't want them to insist to come here, make us food or whatever. Like I don't need any of that. Just want to get better. And like I had headaches, so I didn't want.
Our peaks were like staggered enough to where we were able to take care of each other.
Yeah.
Like, and so that was a sort of, I guess, the bright side of it being sort of the way, or like played out the way that it did.
Yeah.
And Greg says COVID symptoms say dry cough. It was dry originally, and I think that like between your sinuses draining and other things, it became wet later, and now it's like, which I actually prefer it being like what I call like a productive cough, like like opposed to being dry, because it was just painful and dry like for the first like few days.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, and then so the stark contrast was my mother, who has made COVID and the vaccination her entire identity, right? Like it has been, I cannot go to her house without some article. I mean, can you explain it? Because I feel like I'm going to color this too much. It's like
she is. Well, I'm certainly going to color it too. She is like the kind of. I don't really know how to put it. I mean, she is just like a Fauci fangirl.
Yes.
And I don't mean like she's fawning over him, but like everything he stands for is like,
and everything he says is true.
Everything he says is true.
There's no skepticism.
Her identity is all of that. And so like she will constantly talk about the vaccine. She got the booster.
She had to like tell.
She wears her mask outside. She's that kind of person.
Yes. And I do believe sincerely that she's really scared of it. I think that is true. On the other hand, I think an element of it as well for her is, you know, a lot of people that are listening to this have mothers that don't have kids in the house anymore, and they take on these weird pet projects to sort of fill the empty nest.
Yes.
Right? And
we've talked about this before. It's evangelical moms who lost their religiosity and became crystal moms.
And then now it's science. Yeah. It's like, and it kind of can go both ways. Like crystal moms can either be anti-vax to a degree that is ludicrous, or pro-vax to a degree. Like they just kind of form their new religion.
Yeah. There needs to be some driving religion that they can identify with.
And what's been really difficult for me with the pro side, and this isn't like, it's obviously a blanket statement. I can only speak anecdotally to people that are more intimately close to me than the average person, like my family, is that there's this lack of compassion about the fallout economically of all this that we're experiencing, and also the level of sickness that we did end up enduring, plus the logistical nightmares that we've both explained.
Yeah.
And so when I got it initially, like I told her, just of like, because to me it was a big deal, especially because like finances and money have been like a giant conversation between the two of us, because they live a pretty comfortable, a more than comfortable life through which
Certainly.
like they're able to have the feelings they have about coronavirus because they're financially insulated from all of it.
Yeah, it has had zero impact on their financial stability.
Correct.
In fact, they've probably made a ton of
They
money
have
off
made
of
a
it.
ton of money off of it, yes, because my dad is an autistic investor and can see the writing on the wall for what companies are going to make money, such as Pfizer. And so, you know, like, so I tell her that we're both sick, and her, after hearing her talk about this for 2 years and how this is the greatest plague that has ever befell mankind, she goes, well, I'm glad you were vaccinated.
Gee, thanks, Mom.
Thank you for that. Like, okay, number one, if you were just of the opinion that, which she probably was, that she believes that we wouldn't get that sick, then I get that statement. But it's like, again, this absolute isolation from the reality of what this means for me in the future, right? So I generally work in like a gig economy, meaning it's like jobs are not consistent. They come when they come, right?
Yeah.
And so this month I had a few things that I really needed to work out, right? One of them was a client that was supposed to come over this last Thursday, who's also very socially scared of this whole thing, socially, politically, and maybe even physically scared of it. I don't really know. I'm not going to make assumptions for him. But, you know, even though I feel differently than him, I'm not a bad person. So I just told him, like, hey, by Thursday, it would be over like a week since the peak of my symptoms. Like almost, we're getting close to like day 10, right? It can't in good conscience, because I know I'll still test positive, which I did, allow you to come over. And I said, like, I'm not willing to lie to you and pretend nothing's going on. So that had to get rescheduled for another week. Like, that was a large money-making opportunity that I lost out on, right? So that's number one. Number two was yesterday, I got offered, well, a few days ago, I got offered a gig to start like a new DJ residency thing, which has been like kind of the first one since the pandemic started, which are great gigs because they're consistent weekend work that can sort of fill in the gaps when you are sort of a guerrilla music producer, gig worker, right? And I told my friend who gets me these gigs, I said, hey, like, you should know, like, I got this, and I probably would still test positive, but it'll be past, it would have been like day 12.
Exactly,
right?
yeah, and 10 days is the CDC recommendation.
So, and I'm like, I'm
isolation.
Fully vaccinated, got this, like, I'll wear a mask where I'm supposed to, and like the way the venue set up, like, you're pretty detached from the patrons of this place, so it's not, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But then I was supposed to go, like, leave here at 6 o'clock to get there at about 7:30 in LA. And I get a call from him saying they're demanding that you have a negative PCR test or you have gotten the booster. And I go, well, I'm not getting the booster because I just got COVID. So I'm not willing to take a shot for zero reason today. It's going to make me sick for more days.
Yeah.
Plus, I told you I can't pass a test.
Yeah.
So none of it really made sense to me. But
and a PCR test would take at least 24 hours.
Right. So I would have had to have done it 2 days before. And what would have been the point? Because it would just
you would have been sick.
Yeah. And so
crazy.
Like, and so these are like the logistical issues that people seem to take for granted while they're making demands of how people should be behaving based on public health. And it's like you feel sometimes like you're in a simulation because the public policy is being dictated by people who seem to be largely unaffected by all this. But, you know, you go fill your gas tank and it's like $60. You go, like, you know, we go buy groceries, we buy meat, and I've never seen the bill get so high based on items that I've bought for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And I go buy medications and my insurance doesn't cover. I mean, it's just like all these like beatings we're taking, but we're just told to sort of suck it up for the greater good. And I'm like, well, then what is the greater good? Is the greater good not us? Like, you know,
right.
I just don't understand. I'm so fucking confused. Like, I'm so confused. And so, like, yeah, it's like, you know, I know a lot of people have like created these wedges with their families over like their political opinions about COVID. But I mean, like what's difficult with someone like my mother is I did all the things she wanted me to do. Like I have not seen her happier than the day that Sean and I got the vaccine. Yeah. She was literally giddy like a child. And that was weird to me, but I held my tongue, you know, like, and just sort of go, okay, well, I'm just glad she's happy. And what was striking was in a moment of like me being like, hey, I need help right now. It was just like, well, good luck.
Exactly.
And then your parents who are on the like seem to be in the zeitgeist, the detestable political ideology are the ones who are way more caring, way more interested in helping. And it just was
offering all forms of support.
And again, this is only like our anecdotal experience, but man, it was striking.
Yeah, no kidding.
And also too, I mean, like your school is sort of the intelligentsia that created that whole system based on like what my mother believes in. And I was like trying to explain to her, like, we are suffering because of what you choose to believe is true. And I'm telling you it isn't, and I'm your son. So
yeah.
But I don't know. I guess public health policy that makes zero sense, such as like a demand that we get the booster to work in public, even though we got COVID. And it was crazy too yesterday. Like there's an AP article I see it's like trying to downplay natural immunity compared to the booster.
Crazy.
And it's like, again, like our experience is obviously anecdotal. I need to keep repeating that. I'm not saying anyone shouldn't get the vaccine, any of these kinds of things. But we definitely got as sick as we would have if we didn't get it. There's no question. Like I promise you guys, if I found an ounce of truth in the opposite direction, I would be totally honest with you.
Right.
But that was not the case. And so this thing provided 5 months of protection. And it's important to remember on June 15th, we were told that this was, well, they need, like, it's not a vaccine. It isn't.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and I think that they're now unwilling to rectify the mistakes they've made and the lies they've told and how this issue became so radically political that there's no willingness for people to back down on how they feel about it. And so, meanwhile, we're just like caught in the middle of this bureaucratic nightmare with kind of no answers or way out.
Nothing, yeah. Needless to say, it has been a nightmare, but the worst part has been the interactions with other people.
Yes.
But you know what's coming.